The sky turned crimson before anyone understood what was happening. Kyle heard the roar first, a sound like thunder tearing through mountains, and then he saw them. 3 dragons diving toward the village with fire blooming from their jaws. He didn't think. He grabbed his daughter Mira and threw her behind the stone well, covering her body with his own as the first wave of flames rolled over them. The heat was unbearable. His back ignited, skin blistering and cracking, but he pressed down harder, making himself a shield between his child and the inferno. Mira screamed beneath him, and he whispered into her ear that everything would be fine, that she was safe, that he loved her. The dragons made another pass. More fire, more screaming from the village. Kyle felt his strength leaving, felt the world growing distant, but he didn't move. He couldn't move, not while Mira still needed him. When the flames finally stopped, when the roar of wings faded into terrible silence, he managed to look down at his daughter one last time. Her face was burned but alive, her eyes wide with terror and tears. He tried to speak, to tell her to run, to find help, but no words came. His fingers went slack. The world turned dark. Mira held her father as he died, his body still shielding hers, his scorched jacket wrapped around her like a final embrace. Queen Valeria arrived 3 hours later with a battalion of soldiers and healers. The village was ruins, charred timber and ash, bodies in the streets, the smell of death hanging thick in the air. She'd received word of the dragon raid by messenger hawk and rode through the night to reach this place, but she was too late to stop the slaughter. Her soldiers moved through the wreckage, searching for survivors, pulling children from collapsed buildings, offering water to the wounded. Valeria walked among them, her face a mask of controlled fury and grief. This was the 5th raid in 2 months. The dragons were growing bolder, striking deeper into human territory, and her advisors were demanding full-scale retaliation. She found Mira behind the well, still clutching her father's jacket, her small body trembling with shock. The girl's face and arms were badly burned, but she was breathing. Valeria knelt beside her, gently touching her shoulder. Mira didn't respond, didn't even seem to see her. The queen called for a healer, who came running with bandages and salve. As they worked on the girl's wounds, Valeria noticed something clutched in Mira's other hand, a simple wooden carving of a horse, charred but intact, a father's gift to his daughter. Valeria felt something crack inside her chest. This child had lost everything. Her father had died protecting her. And for what? So the cycle of violence could continue? So more children on both sides could suffer? The queen stood, her jaw set with determination. She would not let this stand. She would find a way to end this war, or she would die trying. But first, there was the matter of the dragon they'd captured. Her soldiers had found it, her hiding in the burned remains of the smithy, wounded and alone. A young dragon, barely more than a hatchling by their standards, with silver-blue scales and wide, terrified eyes. The soldiers had bound her with iron chains and were holding her in a makeshift cage at the edge of the village. Valeria's advisors were already calling for her execution. Justice for the dead, they said. A message to the dragon clans. The queen walked to the cage and looked inside. The young dragon, she couldn't have been more than 12 or 13 in human years, was curled in the corner, her wings folded tight against her body, blood seeping from a wound in her side. When she saw Valeria, she flinched, expecting violence. Instead, the queen simply stared, studying her. This was the enemy. This was what they were fighting. A terrified child. "What's your name?" Valeria asked quietly. The dragon girl didn't answer at first, her eyes darting between the queen and the soldiers standing nearby with spears. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. Sera. The name hung in the air between them. Valeria's chief advisor, an older man named Gregory, stepped forward with barely concealed anger. "Your Majesty, this creature participated in the raid that killed 17 people. She must be executed as an example." Valeria didn't look away from Sera. "Did you kill anyone?" she asked. Sera shook her head frantically. "No, I didn't want to be here. They made me come. I got separated when the fighting started. I was trying to hide." Gregory scoffed. "She's lying. Obviously, they all say that when they're caught. But Valeria saw something in Sera's eyes that she recognized. The same look she'd seen in Mira's eyes just minutes ago. Pure, unfiltered terror. The fear of a child who'd been thrown into a nightmare not of her making. The Queen made a decision that would change everything. "Bring healers," she commanded. "Treat her wounds." The soldiers stared at her in disbelief. Gregory's face turned red. "Your Majesty, you cannot be serious. The people demand justice." Valeria finally turned to face him, and her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "The people will have justice, Gregory, but not like this. How it could have slipped outside of our perimeters. How it could have slipped outside of our perimeters. How it could have slipped outside of our perimeters. How it could have slipped outside of our perimeters. How it could have slipped outside of our perimeters. How it could have slipped outside of our perimeters. How it could have slipped outside of our perimeters. How it could have slipped outside of our perimeters. How it could have slipped outside of our perimeters. How it could have slipped outside of our perimeters. She walked away before he could argue further, leaving her soldiers scrambling to obey her orders. As healers approached the cage with medicine and bandages, Sera began to cry, not from pain, but from confusion. She'd expected death. She'd been certain she would be torn apart, burned alive, made to suffer for the sins of her clan. Instead, the human queen had shown her mercy. It made no sense. Nothing about this made sense. In the dragon clans, captured enemies were never spared. Weakness was punished. Mercy was foolishness. But here she was, alive, being tended to by healers who worked with gentle hands despite their obvious fear and disgust. Sera didn't understand humans at all. Over the next 3 days, Valeria worked tirelessly to organize relief for the village survivors. Temporary shelters were erected, food and supplies distributed, funeral rites performed for the dead. Mira was placed under the care of the royal healers, her burns treated with the finest medicines available. The girl barely spoke, lost in a fog of trauma and grief, but she was alive. That was something. Meanwhile, Sera remained under guard but was moved to more comfortable quarters in the Queen's traveling pavilion. Her wounds were healing, though she remained terrified and confused by her treatment. Valeria visited her each evening, bringing food and asking questions about dragon culture, their motivations for the raids, the structure of their clans. Sera answered hesitantly at first, expecting each conversation to be a trap, but the Queen's genuine curiosity slowly broke down her defenses. She learned that Sera had been forced to join the raid by her clan elders, that young dragons were required to prove themselves in battle or face exile, that she'd never wanted to hurt anyone but had no choice if she wanted to survive in dragon society. It was a culture built on strength and dominance, where showing mercy was seen as fatal weakness. The more Valeria learned, the more she understood that this war would never end through violence alone. Both sides were trapped in a cycle of retaliation and revenge, each attack justifying the next, each death demanding another. Someone had to break the cycle. Someone had to be willing to take the first step towards something different. On the 4th day, Valeria made an announcement that shocked her entire court. She declared that Sera would not be executed, that instead she would be held as a protected guest, and that the Queen intended to use her as a bridge toward peace negotiations with the dragon clans. The reaction was immediate and fierce. Half her advisors threatened to resign. Nobles sent angry letters demanding she reconsider. Even her own soldiers grumbled about showing mercy to the enemy. But Valeria stood firm, reminding them all that Kyle, the farmer who died protecting his daughter, had shown the truest form of courage, protecting innocent life even at the cost of his own. If they truly wanted to honor the dead, they would honor that courage by choosing a different path. It was Mira who forced the real confrontation. On the 5th day, still bandaged and weak, she demanded to see the dragon prisoner. The healers tried to stop her, but the girl was determined, fueled by a grief so deep it gave her strength beyond her years. She limped through the camp, supported by a crutch until she reached the pavilion where Sera was being held. The guards looked uncertain but ultimately stepped aside when Mira insisted, with tears streaming down her burned face. She pushed through the tent flap and came face to face with the dragon girl for the first time. Sera stood up quickly, her chains rattling, her expression a mixture of fear and shame. For a long moment, neither spoke. Mira stared at her, at this creature whose kind had killed her father, had destroyed her home, had taken everything from her. She'd come here wanting to scream, to strike out, to make someone pay for the unbearable pain in her chest. But what she saw wasn't a monster. It was just another frightened child. "Why?" Mira finally whispered, her voice breaking. "Why did you come to my village? Why did they kill my father?" Sera's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I didn't want any of this. They made me come. They said if I didn't prove myself in battle, I'd be exiled, left to die alone. I was so scared. When the fighting started, I just hid. I didn't hurt anyone. I swear I didn't." Mira wanted to hate her. Hating would be easier than this, easier than seeing the truth written plainly on Sera's face, that they were both victims of something bigger than themselves, caught in a war neither had chosen. "My father died protecting me," Mira said, her voice trembling. "He covered my body with his and let himself burn so I could live. That's what humans do. We protect each other. We protect children, even when it costs us everything." Sera nodded, fresh tears spilling down her scaled cheeks. "That's what my mother did, too. She protected me from the clan elders when they wanted to throw me into the mountains for being too weak. She died for it. They killed her for showing mercy." The words hung between them like a fragile bridge. Two girls, two species, two losses that mirrored each other perfectly. Mira's legs gave out and she collapsed onto a bench, sobbing. Sera moved toward her instinctively, forgetting her chains, and when the metal pulled tight, she knelt as close as she could get. "I'm sorry about your father," she said quietly. "I'm sorry about your mother," Mira replied. They stayed like that for a long time, two children crying together for everything they'd lost, for the senseless cruelty of a world that demanded they be enemies. When Queen Valeria arrived and found them there, she knew her decision had been right. This was what peace looked like. Two former enemies finding their shared humanity, or whatever the dragon equivalent was, in the midst of impossible grief. But the fragile moment was shattered the next morning when dragon emissaries arrived at the camp's border under a flag of truce. 3 massive dragons, ancient and scarred from countless battles, landed in the field beyond the village ruins. They demanded the immediate return of Sera, threatening total war if she had been harmed. The dragon clans had discovered one of their own was missing, and they would not tolerate a hostage situation. Valeria's military advisors urged her to prepare for battle, to fortify positions and ready the troops. The dragons were clearly looking for an excuse to launch a full-scale invasion. Returning Sera would only embolden them. But the queen saw something different, an opportunity. She ordered her fastest riders to carry messages to the dragon emissaries, requesting a formal meeting to discuss terms. The dragons were suspicious, as expected, but their curiosity was piqued when the message included a strange promise. They would see that their young clan member had been treated with unprecedented respect, and that humans were capable of honor beyond what dragon culture believed possible. The meeting was arranged for dawn the following day, in the clearing between the ruined village and the forest where the dragons had made their temporary camp. Valeria prepared carefully, knowing this single conversation could determine whether there would be war or the first real chance at peace in a generation. She brought only a small honor guard and insisted that Sera be allowed to attend, unbound and treated as a guest rather than a prisoner. When the dragon elders saw Sera approaching with the human delegation, healthy and walking freely, their expressions shifted from rage to confusion. They had expected to find her tortured, broken, perhaps even dead. Instead, she walked beside the human queen with calm dignity, her wounds clearly treated with care. The eldest dragon, a massive creature with midnight black scales and eyes like molten gold, spoke first. His voice rumbled like an avalanche. "Explain this, human queen. Why does our youngling walk free and unharmed? What trick is this?" Valeria met his gaze without flinching. "No trick, only a choice. Your youngling was captured after the raid on this village, yes. My people demanded her death as justice for those who were killed. But I looked at her and saw only a frightened child, forced into battle by a culture that values strength over compassion. I chose mercy over vengeance." The dragon elders exchanged glances, clearly skeptical. Another elder, this one with crimson scales marked by deep scars, growled low in his throat. Mercy is weakness. You spare her to mock us, to show dragon strength is meaningless against human cunning. Valeria shook her head, firmly. I spared her to honor a man named Kyle, a farmer from this village who died protecting his daughter from your flames. He showed true strength, the strength to put another life above his own, the courage to love more than he feared death. If that is weakness, then I choose to be weak. The words seemed to stun the dragons into silence. Such concepts were alien to their way of thinking, yet there was something in the queen's voice that carried undeniable power. Before they could respond, a small figure stepped forward from the human group. Mira, still bandaged, still limping, moved to stand beside Valeria. The girl's burned face was set with determination that seemed impossible for someone so young and wounded. My father was Kyle, Mira said, her voice clear despite her fear. He died protecting me from your fire. I should hate all of you. I should want Sera dead, but I don't. Because she didn't kill my father. This war did. This endless cycle of attacking and revenge. It killed him. It killed her mother too. We've both lost someone we love, because no one will stop fighting long enough to see that we're all just trying to survive. The dragon elders stared at this human child who dared address them directly, but something in her words resonated. The black-scaled elder leaned closer, his massive head lowering to study Mira with ancient eyes. You forgive the one whose kind took your father? He asked, his tone less aggressive now, genuinely curious. Mira looked at Sera, who stood trembling but met her gaze with tearful gratitude. She's not my enemy, Mira said simply. She's just someone else who's scared and hurting. My father taught me that protecting life is what makes us strong. If killing her doesn't bring him back, and it doesn't make me safer, then what's the point? When does it end? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The crimson dragon shifted uncomfortably, his tail sweeping across the ground. It ends when one side dominates completely. That is the way of things. Valeria stepped forward again, her voice cutting through with sharp clarity. Then it never ends. We'll kill each other until there's nothing left worth fighting for, or we can choose something different. I propose a peace treaty, negotiated in good faith, with Sera as living proof that both species can show mercy and honor. Your youngling will be returned to you today, unharmed, and treated as a valued guest. In exchange, you agree to cease all raids on human settlements while we discuss terms. The dragon elders conferred in their own language, a series of rumbling growls and hisses that the humans couldn't understand. Finally, the black-scaled elder spoke again. This is unprecedented. No human has ever offered such terms. We accept your proposal, but know this. If you betray our trust, if any harm comes to our kind during these talks, the war that follows will be unlike anything your people have seen. Valeria nodded solemnly. The same applies to you. We bury 17 people today, including a father who died protecting his child. If you honor their memory by honoring peace, we have a chance. If you betray it, I will personally lead every army in the human kingdoms against you. It was a standoff, built on mutual respect rather than fear, and somehow that made it stronger. Sera stepped forward, addressing the elders directly for the first time. I ask permission to speak. The black-scaled elder inclined his head slightly. Speak, youngling. Sera's voice shook but grew stronger with each word. What the queen says is true. I was terrified when I was captured. I thought I would die horribly, the way we're taught humans kill dragons. But they healed my wounds. They fed me. The queen spoke with me, not as a prisoner, but as someone worthy of being understood. And this girl Mira, whose father died in the raid I was part of, she came to me not with hate, but with grief that matched my own. We cried together for what we've both lost. The elders teach us that humans are cruel and savage, but I've seen more kindness here than I ever saw in the clans. Perhaps everything we've been taught is wrong. Perhaps the true weakness is refusing to question the endless fighting. The words were borderline blasphemous in dragon culture, and the elders reacted with visible shock. But Sera stood her ground, her young face defiant. The Crimson Elder looked like he might lash out, but the Black-Scaled Elder raised a claw to stop him. "You have seen what we have not," the Elder rumbled slowly, "and perhaps in that there is wisdom we have ignored. Very well. We will honor this peace talk. Let it be known that Clan Nightwing accepts the Human Queen's terms." One by one, the other elders gave their agreement, some reluctantly, others with cautious curiosity. The treaty negotiations would begin within the week, on neutral ground chosen by both sides. Sera would return with her clan, but she would also serve as an emissary, sharing what she'd learned about human culture and the possibility of coexistence. As the dragons prepared to leave, Mira approached Sera one last time. The two girls embraced carefully, mindful of Mira's healing burns, and whispered promises to see each other again when the peace talks began. Queen Valeria watched them, and for the first time in years, she felt something that had seemed impossible. Hope. Real, tangible hope that the future might be different than the past. That evening, as the sun set over the ruins of the village, Valeria stood at Kyle's grave. The simple wooden marker bore his name in a single line. He protected life until his last breath. She knelt in the dirt, placing her hand on the earth above where he rested. "I'm honoring your sacrifice," she said quietly to the man she'd never met. Not with revenge, but with the courage to choose differently. "Your daughter is alive because of you. And maybe, just maybe, peace is possible because she found the strength you gave her." The wind rustled through the trees, and in that moment, Valeria allowed herself to believe that Kyle could hear her, that somewhere his spirit understood what his death had set in motion. The peace talks took months. There were setbacks, arguments, moments when it seemed the whole thing would collapse into renewed violence. But each time tensions rose, someone would invoke the memory of what had happened in that burned village. A father's sacrifice, a queen's mercy, a young girl's forgiveness, a dragon's courage to question everything she'd been taught. These moments became touchstones, reminding everyone why they were trying. Mira and Sera met regularly during the negotiations, their unlikely friendship becoming a symbol of what peace could look like. The human child with burn scars and the dragon child who'd been forced into battle together, they proved that the cycle could be broken, that healing was possible even after profound loss. Other children from both species began to meet under supervised conditions, playing together cautiously at first, then with growing ease as they realized their supposed enemies were just other kids. The treaty was finally signed on a cold morning in early winter, in the same clearing where the first meeting had taken place. Representatives from all the major human kingdoms and all the dragon clans gathered to witness the historic moment. Queen Valeria and the Black-Scaled Elder, whose name was revealed to be Vorthrax, signed the document together, their marks side by side on the parchment. The terms were complex. Shared territories, trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, cultural exchange programs, but the core was simple. No more raids, no more revenge killings, no more children forced into a war they didn't start. When it was done, Vorthrax spoke to the assembled crowd. "This peace was bought with the blood of many, but it was built on the courage of a few. We honor the human Kyle, who taught us that protecting life is true strength. We honor Queen Valeria, who chose wisdom over rage. We honor the young ones, Mira and Sera, who showed us that the future need not repeat the past." Mira stood in the crowd, holding Sera's claw hand in her own scarred fingers, and she felt her father's presence like a warm weight on her shoulders. He would never see this day, would never know that his final act of love had rippled outward to touch two entire species. But she knew. She would carry that knowledge for both of them, and she would make sure his sacrifice was never forgotten. As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to celebrate, Mira looked up at the sky where dragons and humans stood together without fear, and she whispered the words she'd needed to say since the day her father died. "I understand now, Dad. You didn't die protecting just me. You died protecting the idea that life is worth more than hate. And that idea just changed the world." The treaty held. Not perfectly. There were violations, disputes, moments of tension that required careful diplomacy to resolve. But the foundation had been laid, and it proved stronger than anyone had dared hope. Within a generation, the concept of human-dragon war became something children learned about in history lessons, a relic of a darker time that wise leaders had chosen to leave behind. Years later, when Mira was a young woman serving as an ambassador between species, she would stand before gatherings and tell the story of her father's sacrifice and the dragon girl who became her sister in all but blood. She would explain how Queen Valeria had honored that sacrifice not with vengeance, but with the courage to break a cycle that had seemed unbreakable. And she would challenge her listeners to find their own courage, to protect life even when hate seemed easier, to choose hope even when despair felt justified, because that was what her father had taught her in his final moments, with his body shielding hers from the flames. That love is stronger than fear, that protecting others is the highest form of strength, that even one person, in one moment, can change the course of history if they're willing to sacrifice for what matters most. Kyle's name was carved into monuments in both human cities and dragon areas. His story was told around fires and in throne rooms, adapted into songs and paintings and legends. But the greatest monument to his memory was the world his death had helped create. A world where children of different species played together without fear, where the word enemy had lost its power, where peace was not just a dream, but a daily reality built on the foundation of one father's love. And that, more than anything else, would have made him proud.